What has the impact been of the U.S. cutting off arms and intelligence to the Ukrainians so far?
Okay, again, as far as the equipment, I don't think you're going to see any real impact for at least several weeks because these are in the pipeline, and it was going to take a while for them to get up to the front lines anyway. But intelligence could have an immediate impact, especially since I think a lot of that intelligence was used for, long range missile strikes. I think that's maybe where you see the first impact. And drone strikes too. I think that's important. Again, we haven't seen any attacks and strikes. I don't think we've seen any period since Trump took office. Definitely not into pre-2014 Russian territory. So that already changed. I think that was a policy decision that Trump actually made good on his promise to just end that. Um, Potentially it can be. Yeah, I think again, it has not necessarily long range, but even medium range. It's just like the the U.S. was constantly feeding this data to the Ukrainians. You say, like there's a concentration of Russian troops here, or there's a depot there just 10 miles behind the line, and that gave them something to aim for. And that has caused losses among the Russians, and it's forced them to be much more careful about how they assemble or don't assemble their forces, and maybe sometimes to choose suboptimal ways of deploying forces and that kind of thing. So I think we could see there will be a consequence in the near future if indeed this intelligence cutoff is. Oh, I think it's real. It's not quite clear what the extent of it is. One thing is, okay, this is just the U.S. I think the U.S. intelligence is very important. Again, the U.S. has by far the most satellites, but then there's also NATO, and I think the NATO flights, they have these drones that circle the Black Sea, as close as possible um, to Russian occupied territory, and they're constantly, collecting information, and that's continuing. So, and then these other agencies, the Europeans uh, say that they're going to try to pick up the slack, and they can probably pick up some of it, but clearly they just don't have the technological capabilities that the Americans have. So it's going to hurt them. There's no question about it. Could hurt them a lot. We'll see.
I saw the Guardian run a story, something more or less just saying that the Storm Shadow missiles are no longer can be used because they relied on U.S. intelligence, U.S. data, U.S. Satellite data. And without it, then they can't use these Storm Shadow missiles.
I'd heard that ahead of time, right? Again, that was reported in the dissident media. Another example where, if you get your information from solid dissident sources, you're going to do a lot better. You won't be surprised by these things down the road. But I think you never heard that in the mainstream media.
Right. I mean, for us in the dissident media, it was clear that these missiles that were being fired into Russia had to be done with U.S. or NATO personnel to input the data. But I wasn't aware that Britain's missiles relied completely on the United States.
Yeah, no, I'd heard that. Yeah.
So yeah, that's wild though. And then you have Keir Starmer and Macron, just saying we're getting ready to go to war with Russia. And they can't even use can't even use their own equipment without us. Their missiles, which aren't even very effective to begin with, but even if they wanted to use them, it requires us. It just made me realize how impotent Europe is militarily.
Right.
Like, I've been complaining about just NATO being a paper tiger and just saying how this realization that the U.S. was just so powerful on paper, but in reality that we fall short in so many ways. But compared to Europe is just nothing. But they have, but they like to bark pretty loudly.
Yeah. Well, there's actually Glenn Deason. He's the political science professor from Norway. Made it, I thought, was a very funny and really spot on comment about the European leaders. He said, like when it comes to group photos and striking moral poses and repeating tired cliches, if it was just those things that made one powerful, Europe would clearly be a superpower. And that's what we're getting, just more and more of that. I find the whole thing just comical.
Yeah.
Like again, I guess I describe them as chickens with their heads cut off. They had no idea what they're saying.